The Burning Crusade Anniversary has been, by pretty much any measure, the most successful classic game Blizzard has put out in a long time. I mean, I knew the hype was there for going back into this version of the game, but I didn't expect it to be this many people. Though that success of course will come with expectations, and Phase 2, which will bring Serpent Shrine Cabin and Tempest Keep, is going to be right around the corner now. PvP participation is also showing signs of cooling off, as it typically does, and there is a growing conversation about loot given the sped up timeline that we now have for this version of the game. We did have the full roadmap at the State of Azeroth not so long ago, and we will be in the Sunwell well before the end of this year. That's going to be a 1-year TBC. So overall, I want to go over the state of TBC Anniversary right now, what's working, what isn't, and what people are talking about as we head into the second phase. So just as a bit of a retrospective, TBC Anniversary opened on February 5th, with Tier 4 raids unlocking 2 weeks later on February 19th. And from there, the roadmap has been relatively clear, as we already know. Phase 2 is scheduled for spring. This is most likely going to happen by the end of April, if not early May. Phase 3 will be Black Temple and Hyjal in summer, sometime around July or August. Zul'Aman follows in autumn as Phase 3.5 around October, and then the Sunwell Plateau closes things out, most likely in November or December, but generally just before the year ends. This is a lightning expansion where we're going to be going through things pretty quickly, and I think just saying that Phase 2 is actually going to be here most likely before May will be a bit of a wake-up call to people that this is how fast things are moving. This speedy pace for TBC was a very deliberate choice by Blizzard, but now it's becoming apparent that it will be this fast. It's beginning to divide opinions. People who enjoy it say it creates focus and we get to go through content without too many droughts, whilst other people feel as though they aren't getting enough time to enjoy the current content, and if they get unlucky with loot, they're going into next phase missing tons of items which they would have liked to have had. More on that in a moment. What you can't really argue about is the player numbers that have seen growth week on week. Over 242,000 unique characters raided after the first week Tier 4 unlocked. That's more than doubling the previous peak from vanilla on the Anniversary realms, and as of the most recent reset, we're somewhere over 300,000 unique characters between raiding and PvP, which for a re-release I would say are pretty good figures. This is on top of Midnight releasing as well and now being well into the swing of things. I remember not so long ago Holly Longdale did an interview and she mentioned that there isn't that much of a crossover between the retail and the classic player base, and seeing a rise week on week for TBC during a new retail release kind of points towards that. It would seem the people who have the data know what the data says. There's one other thing I want to mention about the player numbers too. So recently Warcraft logs had a reporting bug and TBC characters were showing twice. However, Ironforge.pro only counts unique characters, so I really do think there are just this many people playing. The more interesting question now of course is how well will these numbers hold up going forwards. Phase 1 is well underfarmed by this point in time, and we're starting to see a lot of individuals or guilds reach that point that you tend to in TBC. My opinion of this expansion really hasn't changed very much. The first month or month and a half or so is genuinely one of the best World of Warcraft experiences ever. There is so much to do. You've got your leveling, you've got your achievements, your professions, your heroic dungeons. You can log in and play for hours and hours and every day, and there will just be something else to work towards. And that's truly an amazing feeling. But after you have all of that sorted, you're doing relatively okay on your gold income, you're just kind of doing the raid, and it does turn into raid logging relatively quickly after that. And whether or not that's a good thing is very much up to you personally. But this trend of TBC going into raid logging I think is one of the reasons why they're trying to speed things up a bit more this time around, so people aren't getting too bored just farming the same raid. Then again, some people want more time farming the same raid because of loot, and loot really has been a big discussion in the community at the moment. To understand why people are talking more about loot now needs a bit of context as well. You need to think about what makes this version of TBC different from its 2021 release, for example. Back then the expansion ran for well over a year, so if you missed out on a specific drop from phase 1, you had quite some time to keep going back and to try again. Here phase 1 is going to last overall somewhere in the region of about 10 to 12 weeks, and after that phase 2 will be here, and yes, you can still technically go back, but the focus of progression definitely shifts in a shorter space of time. On top of that, with these re-releases, each time the game comes out, things just get a little bit more min-max oriented than the last release, and this is an unavoidable consequence of the same player base going through the same content again and again. People understand the game at a stronger level now. They know their best in slot lists and so on. They know which items are genuinely irreplaceable versus ones which are kind of just upgrades and they can work towards something else. And when people have this extra knowledge, they're gonna feel the items that are missing more acutely than they would have previously. On top of that, there's no confirmed TBC error server either, which means for a lot of people this anniversary cycle is like the one real shot they have at having a fully decked out character in all the items they could want. And this puts some kind of time pressure on each phase where people want to feel as though they've really completed it before having moved on to the next one. It didn't feel the same way as this in 2021. I mean, we can take what is probably the most contested item of the expansion as an example, Dragon Spine Trophy from Gruul's Lair. If you do physical damage, basically you want to have it. And in a 25 player guild with about 10 to 12 resets, you are not going to have as many as you would have wanted to. And if you can't commit to a guild due to time or whatever it may be and you're having to pug, realistically there's a very low chance you get this item. But it's not just Dragon Spine Trophy either. If we look at next phase, we've got Belt of 100 Deaths from Lady Vash. If you attack with weapons, basically you want it. We've got Cursed Vision of Sargeras from Illidan next phase after that. Pretty much all physical damage dealers will want it. There are certain items which are just so much better than everything else that everyone is going to want them, and this sped up expansion cycle is going to make that really difficult to do, and I have seen some solutions floating around. The most drastic approach would be a new badge vendor for the more contested items with the sensible framing that it wouldn't go live immediately. The idea would be that when a new tier unlocks, the previous tier's contested items, or just items in general I suppose, would then be purchasable with badges of justice. So tier 4 items will be available when tier 5 drops, tier 5 when tier 6, and so on. Meaning the raid itself is the primary path during an active phase, but you're not going to feel as much as though you have this time window to get the item and then it's going to become even more difficult. Alongside that, Blizzard could consider moving up the timeline for adding badges of justice to bosses that currently aren't dropping them, specifically from Karazhan. In original TBC and in 2021 for that matter, badges from Karazhan bosses were a retrospective catch-up mechanic that didn't arrive until the Zul'Aman phase. In our TBC Anniversary, Zul'Aman is going to be after BlizzCon in September. Who's still going to be running Karazhan by that point in time? Not that many people. They could very much bring that forwards even without adding the badge vendor. But if they, for example, did move that forwards and did have a badge vendor, it would give players a more reliable progression path alongside the RNG of loot tables, and it would actually still keep people running Karazhan long term because that place has a ton of bosses, which would mean a ton of badges, and it's easier than heroic dungeons, isn't it? Though if they were to go the vendor route, they may have to think about adding some new sort of currency, or you could just farm a few hundred badges, wait until the new tier opens, and buy everything that was hard to get from the last tier instantly, and that just typically isn't how these systems tend to operate. Just think about how Blizzard introduced new currencies for the Titan Rune dungeons during Wrath Classic, or even just how each new tier within Wrath Classic had a brand new type of badge, just so people couldn't stockpile. Blizzard have had this problem and solution in future versions of the game and they've acted on it there. Will they act on it here though? Who knows? The other approach, and the far more simple approach, is to just implement one extra item dropping from bosses. And they do have a precedent of already doing this as well, by the way. They did it in Season of Mastery a long time ago after the population started to kind of drop off really quickly. This would at least keep raid loot tied to the raid though. And I do understand there are counter arguments for this as well. You'll hear people say things such as loot scarcity is part of what makes classic raiding exciting. It's not about the difficulty you're clearing, those things are given. The cool bit is what items drop. That's what everyone wants to see. And if everyone has the difficult to get items, well, they're just not very special anymore, are they? Or people would say typically a good thing about vanilla or TBC is that you do have an incentive to go back and do old raids. But I think that's just enjoyable up to a certain point potentially. And then of course there's people who who argue that, well, you really don't need all the BIS items at all. You're going to clear the raid fine either way because everything's probably going to be post-nerf, and all of these have merit to them. There's also one more thing I want to mention that happened during TBC Classic. So back in 2022 when Phase 3, so Black Temple and Hydra released, Blizzard did the following changes. They made it so bosses in SSC, TK, Magtheridon and Grul's Lair dropped an additional tier token. Now tier sets aren't really what are holding people up in terms of what they're not getting before the phase will end, but still it's a precedent of a change that happened during TBC that could be moved forwards one phase perhaps. Overall, I kind of expect Blizzard to remain hands off here, but things have changed in this game so many times because enough people have asked for it. So really I'm just bringing up discussion points that I've seen online. Overall, TBC Anniversary is on a bit of a fun server setting, and if I were Blizzard I would be leaning into that rather than just trying to keep to how things traditionally are. We shall see what they do though. Aside from PvE, we have some points worth talking about in PvP as well, and whilst the PvE raiding content has shown growth week on week, PvP is already dropping in its player base, going from about 33,000 players at its peak down to about 26,000 as of last reset. And what can I say other than TBC Arena is starting to show some unavoidable problems, such as, I don't know, the rogue class. If you've been playing 2s, then pretty much every single arena you'll see a rogue, and yeah, Blizzard did not do a very good job at balancing this class, that's all I can say. Rogues have absolutely everything in TBC. They feel as though they're an expansion ahead when it came to their PvP design. Insane CC, survivability, damage, you name it, they have it pretty much. Another problem people will be finding with TBC Arena is just how RNG heavy it is. And this is the most RNG version of Arena ever, where just about everything can resist, and people wonder about in the opener with 3 extra items that give stealth detection just so they can guarantee it. Unless you're playing a human, of course, where you just press perception and you always get the opener because it's just way overpowered at that. There'll be people who know and love TBC Arena despite its flaws, but I think for a lot of people coming into it, they've given it a go and said, wow, is this really how it was? And the answer to that is yes, this is how TBC Arena is. That being said, whilst I feel as though there was some unavoidable issues, there was absolutely some avoidable ones too, which Blizzard just haven't acted on yet. One of them was the change to start people's personal rating at 1500 and making it so you didn't have to be part of an arena team anymore. Now at the surface level, I thought this seemed as though it was a good change, and I was definitely positive about it. However, as people have started playing, they've realized that they're winning only a few points when they win and losing considerably more. And the reason behind this is because your matchmaking rating, or MMR, is starting much lower than your current rating. So when you lose to people at an equal rating to you, the game thinks you're losing against people who are considerably below you rating wise. And the only way to even this out is to just play games until your MMR fixes itself. And I've mentioned it fairly recently, but this is going to be so disencouraging for newer people trying to get into Arena. They're going to play some games, they might go 10 wins, 5 losses or something, and they're down Arena points. That just doesn't make sense to any, well, sensible person, I don't think. Especially when you're starting off at 1500 rating, you should feel as though your gains and losses should at least be neutral. I don't know if this is something Blizzard necessarily can fix now, but at least I guess it's a learning point if they ever do this system again. And then there's actually getting into PvP and the honor games that exist within the game at the moment. The main way people are gaining honor is just flying across the towers in Hellfire Peninsula and Terracar Forest because it's A, quick, and B, easy. There's no real meaningful PvP going on here. This is almost as boring as running down AV during vanilla to min-max your honor gains, but at least it doesn't take as long, so I guess that's a positive. Though I don't think I'm crazy for saying that Battlegrounds should give the most honor. They should be the best way to earn this particular currency. Battleground gearing is how you get to start on the ladder, and at the end of the day, the competition and best gear will always be from Arena, so I really don't see why they're making it so difficult to get a foot on that ladder and to begin climbing the PvP gearing system, especially given our massively sped up timeline for TBC. Again, here I think there are some pretty straightforward solutions. You know that honor modifier we had during the pre-patch? Just turn it back on and let people get bonus honor when doing PvP. I really think this is a pain point in the game that doesn't have to exist right now. Overall though, TBC Anniversary is still looking incredible heading into Phase 2. The numbers have been strong and it's genuinely impressive to see this version of the game doing so well. Yes, I think there are issues around loot acquisition and PvP, but it's clearly not been enough to make the game lose players yet. It's also worth noting something else here. With this many players engaging with the game and us having no determined future for TBC Anniversary, a classic era equivalent for Burning Crusade feels as though it's increasingly something which is likely to happen at some point in time. And here's another thing, because if TBC does get its own era realms, the long-term argument for changing the base game format actually weakens considerably, because you wouldn't need these extra badge vendors or bonus honor from PvP. If it was an era server that was just running indefinitely, then I think it's completely fine to leave things as they are, because people can gradually work towards them at a pace which the game actually intended. However, if Anniversary is just a one and done in a year, then yeah, I agree with speeding things up as people have been commenting about. But again, in typical fashion, Blizzard always waits as long as they possibly can before they let you know exactly what they're going to be doing. So probably until BlizzCon, we're going to be hanging on for the news, and you're just going to have to play TBC and enjoy it for what it is. And if we get any changes, great, but I wouldn't exactly hold my breath for them. What do you think though? How are you getting on with TBC Anniversary at the moment heading into Phase 2? Are you finding the things that I've gone over here problems, and would you want any of these solutions to be in the game? Let me know down below. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.